Welcome to Breaking the Chains. In episode 10, we're tackling one of the toughest parts of the recovery journey, relapse. We'll break down why relapse happens, the science behind it, and how it fits into the larger picture of recovery. Whether you're on your own journey or supporting someone else, this episode offers insight and hope. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know, addiction's something that touches so many lives.
Yeah.
And today we're going to really get into some fascinating notes that you shared with me about relapse and recovery.
Okay.
And, you know, I was looking through these notes, and one of the things that really stood out to me is this idea that relapse is often a part of recovery, not a failure.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important to emphasize. You know, relapse is part of the process.
So why is that? Why is relapse considered a part of the process and not, like you said, a failure?
Yeah, well, you know, addiction is a chronic illness. And like many chronic illnesses, there can be setbacks.
Okay.
And so we have to start thinking about relapse not as this like end of the road, you know, you failed, you're done, but more as, okay, you know.
A setback.
What happened? What can we learn from this?
Yeah, what can we learn from it?
What were the triggers? Where did things kind of go off track? And how can we adjust the treatment plan or the coping mechanisms or the support system so that you have a better chance of success?
So it's almost like every time there's that setback, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn and grow and like build up that I don't know,
resilience.
Yeah.
And awareness too, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, you know, there are things that trigger a relapse that maybe you weren't even aware of before.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And so by going through that experience, you can then say, okay, what do I need to do differently next time I'm in that situation?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what the trigger is, you're going to keep getting tripped up by it.
That's so true. So speaking of triggers, I mean, we're talking about relapse.
Yeah.
The notes mention these common triggers for relapse.
Right.
And they seem to break them down into kind of two categories, like internal and external triggers. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So internal triggers, those are things that are happening within you.
Okay.
You know, so it could be stress, it could be anxiety.
Okay.
It could be boredom.
Right.
It could be, you know, feeling lonely or isolated.
Okay.
All those kinds of things that are happening kind of inside your head and in your body.
Okay.
External triggers are more about the environment around you. Okay. So it could be certain people that you used to use with. It could be places that you used to go to use.
Right.
It could be, you know, seeing drug paraphernalia or even smelling certain smells or hearing certain sounds that kind of bring you back to that time when you were using.
Like the sensory thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really about being aware of both those internal and external triggers.
Okay, so we know what triggers are. We know that relapse is a part of the process.
Right.
What do we do about it?
Well, the good news is that there are lots of different strategies that people can use to prevent relapse or to manage triggers. And so some of these are things that you can do on your own.
Okay. And
some of them involve getting help from others.
Okay, so let's start with the ones that you can do on your own.
Okay.
What are some strategies or techniques?
Well, you know, one thing that's really important is just developing healthy coping mechanisms. So, you know, instead of turning to drugs or alcohol when you're feeling stressed or anxious, what are some other things that you can do that will help you to feel better?
So like what kinds of things are we talking about?
Well, it could be things like exercise or spending time in nature.
Okay.
Or listening to music or, you know, practicing relaxation techniques like meditation or...
Yeah, there were a couple of interesting relaxation techniques in the notes, like progressive muscle relaxation.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that one was really interesting. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So progressive muscle relaxation is basically where you go through and you systematically tense and release different muscle groups in your body.
Okay.
And the idea is that by doing that, you become more aware of where you're holding tension.
Okay.
And you learn to kind of let go of that tension.
Right.
So it can be really helpful for managing stress and anxiety.
So you're kind of retraining your body to relax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And there are other techniques too, like mindfulness meditation.
Right.
Where you're really just focusing on the present moment.
Okay.
And not getting caught up in your thoughts or your worries.
Yeah.
And that can be really helpful for preventing relapse because a lot of times relapse is triggered by those cravings and those urges that come up.
Right.
And if you can just kind of observe them and let them pass without acting on them, then you're much more likely to be successful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because you mentioned the internal triggers, like stress, anxiety, all of that.
Right.
But then there's the external triggers.
And it seems like managing those would require almost a different set of skills.
Absolutely.
Like how do you deal with those?
Well, I think the first step is really just being aware of what your triggers are.
Okay.
So if you know that certain people or places or things are likely to trigger you,
right,
then you can try to avoid those triggers as much as possible.
So it's like being proactive about knowing what's going to set you off, and then...
Yeah, and sometimes you can't avoid those triggers completely.
Right.
You may have to go to a certain event, or you may have to see a certain person.
Right.
But in those cases, you can develop a plan for how you're going to cope with that trigger. So, you might have a support person that you can call.
Right.
Or you might have a mantra that you can repeat to yourself.
Right.
Or you might have a plan for, if you start to feel cravings, what are you going to do to distract yourself?
Yeah. Okay, so it's having those tools in your back pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it seems like you're kind of hinting at this, but one of the big things that the notes emphasize is the importance of support.
Oh, absolutely.
Like a support system.
Yeah, support is absolutely essential.
Yeah. Why is that so important?
Well, because recovery can be really challenging.
Right.
And it's really hard to do it alone.
Yeah.
You need people who are going to support you and encourage you and hold you accountable.
Okay.
And who are going to be there for you when you're struggling.
Oh, so who are those people?
Well, it could be family members. It could be friends.
Okay.
It could be a therapist or a counselor. It could be a support group.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of different sources of support.
Yeah. And the notes mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right.
I'm assuming that's where a therapist comes in. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is a type of therapy that's really focused on helping people to identify and change negative thought patterns and behaviors that are contributing to their addiction.
So it's almost like rewiring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's about rewiring those thought patterns and those behavioral patterns.
Yeah. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's a very effective treatment for addiction.
Okay.
And it can be really helpful for preventing relapse as well.
Now, one of the things that I found really powerful in the notes was the section on stories of recovery. Mm-hmm. And there are some amazing profiles in there of people who have been through it and come out on the other side.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that's so important to share.
Absolutely.
Why is that so important?
Because it gives people hope.
Okay.
When you're struggling with addiction, it can be really easy to feel like you're the only one.
Yeah.
Like nobody understands what you're going through, and like there's no way out.
Right.
But when you hear stories of other people who have been there and who have recovered, it gives you hope that you can too.
It's like proof.
It is, yeah. It's like proof that recovery is possible.
And there was one particular story, I think her name was Sarah, that I found really inspiring.
Yeah.
She had struggled with opioid addiction for years, and went through a lot of different treatment programs, and had a lot of setbacks, but she eventually found a combination of medication-assisted treatment and a really strong support network that helped her to get into recovery and stay in recovery. And she actually went back to school.
Wow.
And became a substance abuse counselor.
That's great.
Which I thought was just incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That she was able to turn her experience into something that could help others.
Absolutely.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, and there's so many stories like Sarah's out there. There's so many people who have overcome addiction.
Right.
And who are living happy and fulfilling lives. And I think it's really important to share those stories.
Yeah, I agree.
So that people know that recovery is possible.
So to kind of sum up everything that we've talked about, it seems like the key takeaways here are that relapse is a common part of the recovery journey.
Right.
It's not a failure.
It's not the end.
It's not the end.
Yeah.
Understanding your triggers, both internal and external, is crucial.
Absolutely.
And having that support system in place is absolutely essential.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap things up here, what's the one thing that you really want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the most important thing is to remember that recovery is possible.
Okay.
You know, no matter how long you've been struggling, no matter how many times you've relapsed, there is always hope. And there are people who care about you and who want to help you.
Yeah.
And there are resources available to you. Yeah.
So please don't give up.
Yeah. I think that's a really powerful message. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
There's always hope.
There is always hope.
And recovery is possible.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think the profiles and the notes are a really good example of that. So I would encourage everyone to check those out.
Absolutely.
And really, you know, get inspired by those stories.
I think you'll be surprised by the resilience of the human spirit.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you later.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell for more.